Rabbi Judah Kerbel is rabbi and the second youngest member of the Queens Jewish Center in New York. I came across Rabbi Kerbel's sermon for Parshas Vayetze, published online, and I was struck by its poignancy and his candor. We discussed the purpose of a rabbi sharing personal challenges with a congregation.
I think there's a place for a rabbi talking about themselves, their struggles. I think that's valuable, because I think people want to feel close to you, and it helps people understand that you're human, and there are things that people can learn from how we deal with these things.
How to strike the right balance between being inspirational or using the pulpit as therapy. We also discuss some of the goals of a rabbi's sermon.
That the goal of a preacher is to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comforted.
And even how to use humor effectively from the pulpit.
Don't do it just for the purpose of warming up an audience, but if it's something that really actually gets to the core of the message of the drasha, I found that could be an effective way to open.
And now, without further ado, here's my conversation with Rabbi Judah Kerbel.
I'm going to kind of jump in from the middle, where I saw your drasha. You printed it up afterwards, the one on Parshas Vayetze, the big, maybe you want to talk a little bit about the background of it.
Okay, yeah. So that was a drasha I gave last year, Parshas Vayetze, and I decided to post it online this year. I think I actually first posted it as a Times of Israel blog, and then I decided to also put it on YU Torah. And that comes from a very personal place. My wife and I have had a long journey with infertility at this point. And for a while, it just we kind of expected that could happen for us. And we rolled with the punches for a little while, and we didn't really talk about it with anyone. I think our family knew a little bit what was going on, but not because of shame or even pain, but for a while it was just kind of like, okay, so we're gonna figure this out, and we're gonna do what we can do. As time went on, it got a little bit more painful, but we kind of kept our cards close, and it's not like we were hiding it from people, but we didn't actively talk about it. And then came a point where it's just been going on for long enough that at the point that I gave the drasha, some of my congregants knew that we were dealing with this, but not necessarily. Again, some people might have suspected. I don't know, but we figured that it was kind of worth just sort of putting out there. And even then, we decided, that drasha in particular, I ran everything by my wife. It was her decision for me to talk about it publicly, and I.
When you say it was her decision, meaning she prompted you to it, or she agreed with it?
I think she prompted it, actually. It was something that we kind of talked about from time to time, and then I think there was a point where she said, if you want to talk about this, I'm ready for this to be out there a little bit. So, but the both the Dvar Torah piece and everything around it, I ran by her. Even then, we decided, or I decided, not to really talk about us per se, but to talk about the concept. It was it's very present in the Parshiot, and I think it's very meaningful in the whole scheme of things, that it's something that most of our matriarchs and Hanan went through. So we didn't talk about us, but the fact that I was talking about it, and I think the message behind it, I think hopefully gave a sense that it was coming from a personal place. And then I decided also to kind of put in the context of Jewish history. And I think, on the one hand, again, we didn't feel like we needed to hide it, and I think we even thought it was good for people to know what was going on in the background of our lives. And even then, I think when it comes to, and that's this is a big question, in terms of how the rabbi speaks to the community. Do you talk about yourself? Do you talk about your struggles and the like? And I think there's a place for a rabbi talking about themselves, their struggles. I think that's valuable, because I think people want to feel close to you, and it helps people understand that you're human, and there are things that people can learn from how we deal with these things. And at the same time, speaking from the pulpit shouldn't be therapy, and it shouldn't be self-centered. But there should be a sense that it's, that there's something constructive being done with it. So that's kind of how I decided to go about that particular drasha, was that I think that I felt that people could sort of put the pieces together, that the fact that I was talking about infertility, we don't have kids, you've known us for long enough, would kind of put that together. And at the same time, I didn't want it just to be like, I'm doing this so I can get something off my chest, but that there's some sort of bigger message.
So when you prefaced it, you said something to the effect of, this is a very personal topic for me. Is that where you left it? Did you say anything more about it other than that?
So that actually, I think I only added that. I think I added that specifically for the Times of Israel piece, but that was not a preface I gave when I gave the drasha.
So it was really implied. It was for people to. You didn't address it head on. But
and there are people who like knew explicitly, so they definitely got it. And again, at this point, I don't know what people say and don't say, but I imagine at this point that people kind of have a sense of what's going on.
Mm-hmm. What was the feedback that you got from it afterwards? First in live, and then also in print.
I think people were touched by it. I think people appreciated that we were able to talk about it. So I think people found it to be a point of experience, and I posted it on my Facebook page, and I think people were just like inspired to see the resilience that we've built, which is obviously not something that we chose to sort of go into, but once we're going through it, I think people were touched by it.
Was that the first thing that you had kind of revealed about yourself personally from the pulpit, or was this like a theme that you try to mine your own experience for some whether it's challenges or struggles or successes or things like that? Do you divulge of yourself?
I don't know if that was the first. There are anecdotes that come up. I don't know. I think that was probably one of the deepest things I divulged. But I mean, sometimes in a drush, I just talk about an experience that we had. So that's not like self-disclosure in terms of some the deep dark secrets of life, but
sure.
But I find that I find it's dafka, like when it's like vacation, or even just like taking like a night off, and we go out and do something and experience the world, that the world is a classroom a little bit, and I bring that in a little bit. So I'll talk about things that I've experienced or things that have happened to me. I do. One thing that does come to mind is that on Rosh Hashanah, I talked a little bit about in talking about Emunah. I just made in passing. I made a comment about how I struggle with anxiety, and I was talking about that through the context of Shivisi Hashem L'Nagdi Tamid, and there's a couple different applications of that pasuk, but part of that is meant to be sort of a statement of Emunah, that when Hashem is in front of, when I put Hashem in front of me, so Shivisi, like I feel equanimity, and I said that that's sometimes easier said than done, and I know that because I myself struggle with anxiety, and there was, I mean, I'm sure there are a number of people in the audience who struggle with anxiety. One time I went to see a psychologist just about sort of like a one-off session, and for insurance purposes, she gave me a thing that said general anxiety disorder, because she said that everybody has anxiety, so you can kind of.
I got one of those when I was a kid too.
Yeah. But there was somebody who really appreciate he heard that comment and he appreciated it. So I don't have a there aren't necessarily so many times that I've gone on my way to like again talk about anything because I don't want to do therapy in front of everybody, but when I feel like something is relevant, I don't have a problem necessarily talking about some of the very sort of human things that I go through.
Right. I guess maybe the guideline would be like lito ellis, right? If there's a purpose to it, there's a point
Yeah,
to it.
yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Let me ask you, is there anyone that you look up to in terms of their speaking style that may be used as a model for some of these types of kind of deeper types of talks? Anyone that you've seen speak and say, I'd like to do something like that, like a little bit more, transformational or moving or.
I mean, I'd say my mentors in Drush are I would say my live mentors are Rabbi Menachem Penner, who still teaches homiletics class at YU. For a long time it was Rabbi Lookstein, and I did take a couple sessions with Rabbi Lookstein one summer, but the sort of required class I think for the most part is transitioned to Rabbi Penner. Rabbi J.J. Schachter is definitely one of the individuals who's shaped my many aspects of the craft of drash for me. One particular rabbi that I look up to is my in-laws rabbi in Silver Spring, Maryland, Rabbi Bram Weinberg. I'm always inspired by his by his divrei Torah and in his speaking style. Something that I look up to, not necessarily something that I entirely emulate, but someone I look up to. But in terms of the craft also, Rav Soloveitchik and Rabbi Norman Lamb have made a big impact on me also in terms of the sort of the craft of Russia.
Would you read through his sermons? Is that how you
Rabbi Lamb?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I never merited to hear him live, but the year that he passed away, I read the volumes Drush L'Dorot. I read them through from cover to cover that year.
Yeah. Let me ask you also about you are a middle school Rebbe, if I understand correctly.
So I was. I'm not anymore, which itself is the whole story. But
okay, yeah, go ahead. So what I was going to ask you is that in terms of I mean, obviously there's a difference between classroom environment and more formal presentation in the shul, but in terms of the managing attention, trying to get people's to kind of stay engaged, locked in on you, how do you see the similarities and differences between kids and adults?
I mean, I think the fact that it's different is probably why I'm still doing one and not the other. It's hard with kids. I mean, that was my experience. I think the thing that's sort of common is that you have to think a little bit outside the box, and it can't just be about the content, but there has to be some sort of hook to engage. With kids, actually, I think one thing that sort of I liked was that it was actually much easier, I felt like, to interact in a classroom with kids in terms of teaching versus sometimes adults come to a shiur or drasha and they're just happy for you to speak to them, but if you put something out there, there's more hesitancy to pipe up or to say something. There's certain people who do, and but sometimes I find adult audiences could be a little bit more passive, but kids have a lot to say, and are not shy to things that adults might be sort of ashamed to be like. I was like, oh, is that like a ridiculous question? Like, kids are not as bashful about asking those things, and it can actually it can make things interesting and can make things very meaningful in the classroom. But there is with both audiences, there's definitely a need to think intentionally about how you hook them. And one thing that I tackled in a drasha last year, I gave a drasha called "The Value of Boring," and it was based on I think the impetus for it. There were a couple of things that sparked the idea. Um, one was a cover page story from the Atlantic last spring. I was talking about how the metaverse and just everything on the internet has made it impossible for us to experience any sort of boredom and the like. Sichas Mussar that my Rabbi Jeremy Weider gave around the same time also sparked it. But my challenge was not to say to Baal Batim, you should be you should be susceptible to being bored and should just let anything go. I think I would I 100% advocate that Torah needs to be engaging. It's on the speaker to make it engaging, and we find in Chazal that it was a Rava who always began with Miled B'dichusa, that even Chazal there was a recognition that you need to find a way to grab people in. But the sort of the challenge I put out there is like what's our goal in coming to learn Torah? Is the goal entertainment or is it education? And I think that's something that I think both in schools and in shuls and everything. It's a question for us to think about. Again, not to sort of excuse bad delivery or bad preparation or sort of lazy ways of preparing, but where is that and I guess as a community you can maybe it's something that you thought about, but like as a speaker, is it really my job to entertain them or to educate them, and like what's the difference, and like where do they come together? Something I tried to tackle there a little bit. In addition to the fact that I think there's different goals in learning Torah and entertainment that are noble and something that's worth thinking about.
Yeah, I remember hearing a lecture by Rabbi Shlomo Brevda Zatzal, and he said that in one of these yeshivas in Europe, I forget if it's Kelm or Slobodka or somewhere, where they would intentionally speak in a monotone so that you would be forced to only pay attention to the tochen and nothing else. and you would have to struggle against your lethargy and everything. It would strip away everything except for the tochen.
That was definitely not my message, but
yeah, it's a different generation. Tell me a little bit about QJC, the Queens Jewish Center. What's the demographic there?
That's interesting because you're saying that I guess looking at me as being sort of a younger individual. So I actually have a relatively older population, which actually speaks to the fact that perhaps that not once in my 4.5 years have I gotten a complaint that my drasha was too long. And usually it doesn't matter how long you speak. Usually somebody, for somebody it's too long, but it's mostly a empty nester crowd. We have some younger families also, but I'm the second youngest adult in the shul, and my wife is the youngest adult in the shul. And even with some of the younger families, a number of them are, let's say, 5 to 10 years older than us. But it makes it interesting in terms of thinking about audience and content.
So, what are some of your goals with your drushas to this demographic? What are you trying to accomplish?
I think there could be a few goals to giving a drasha. I think in general, one goal that I think that's always overarching a drasha is to educate. And I think there should always be something new that I take away. I try not to use sources that are trite, or even if there is sort of like a well-known, something from Gemara or Rashi or something like that. I try to, give it, sort of a different perspective, so that one is always coming away. And I think for me also, like I think it's important to. I think it's important that there's always something new that's being taught. So I think that's always sort of at the surface, but it really depends on the drasha, because sometimes the goal is to sort of inspire an action, that there's a particular particular action item that I want to communicate. Sometimes it's to I think especially like when I think about a lot of my Israel drushas, it's just to sort of take something that we're experiencing it and to give expression to it, and to be able to empathize and to console. There's an expression that that some people that the goal of a preacher is to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comforted. So when you're trying to afflict the comforted, it's more likely you're probably focusing on some sort of action item, but sometimes also I think there's great value in just being able to say, with COVID, with the Israel stuff, to say like we're going through something, and here's a Torah perspective to help us frame it and to sit with it, that can leave people coming away feeling like that that they're seen, and that they come with a little comfort. And I think there's also, I guess, a third element is to articulate values. I think there's also, ideas can really shape who we are and what we value. And so I think sometimes there's also Bowman Drusha just to give expression to values and ideas that are important to us, that stick with us also.
Mm-hmm. So when in the week do you begin? Everybody has a different process. Right now is Monday. Where are you holding in your drusha?
I sort of actually have an idea already. So one thing that I did from the beginning of my time here was that I would always include a topic for the drusha in the weekly handout, which I guess the initial goal was just to give people a sense of, what I'm talking about, maybe to excite them a little bit. One thing that it does for me is that it means that towards the beginning of the week, I'm actually thinking about what I plan to talk about. Because sometimes in terms of actually putting together drusha, it might be, if I'm lucky, it's Wednesday night, but sometimes it's Thursday night, even Friday. But even like when it's a little bit more last minute, I'm not starting from scratch, but I've already kind of figured out like what it is I want to talk about. I usually have some sort of vort source in mind or something, and then it's just it's the crafting that comes a little bit later in the week. But having that multi-step process, I actually find is very helpful. That I'm not panicking, a day or two before that. And I was like, I have to do this all right now, and I have no idea where to start. So I think that's actually very helpful.
Yeah. So you said earlier that sometimes there's an action that you have in mind for the congregation to take. So how does that play into the preparation process? Because sometimes the action is not necessarily inherent in the parsha. Let's say you want people to start coming to minyan. Daily minyan is attendance is low. So how you find, do you try to pull that out of the parsha somehow, or what would you do in a situation like that?
I think it guess depends on what the situation, the action item is. Like sometimes there's something going on in the world and it needs to be addressed, and then you kind of have to look into the parsha to figure out like if there's anything that speaks to that or hints to it. But something like minyan attendance is kind of something that's always looming in the background, and if there's something that parsha that kind of jumps out to me, so I'll use that as an opportunity to talk about it. So it can kind of go both ways there.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And are you more of a notes person in terms of, how does that work? Do you write it out? Do you have some loose points? Do you read what from the script? What kind of delivery would you say you?
I've vacillated over the years on that. I think at first I was more, I wrote it out and had the whole thing in front of me. When I was a rabbinic intern, I got feedback that people would love to see me sort of speak more from notes than from like an actual script, and I did that for a while, and I did that when I started in the shul, and then there was a whole period where I wasn't really giving, I wasn't giving drushes at all. I was writing them, uploading them, And then
That was during COVID?
during COVID, yeah. During COVID, I was just uploading them, and then even sort of like once we came back to shul, I would give like a 3 minute Dvar Torah. That was usually like, I was learning Ramban that year. Shabbos morning before shul, I would go through Ramban, find a Ramban that interested me, and just spend 3 minutes talking about that. And then there was an actual drasha that was uploaded, printed, whatever. After COVID, I kind of having I just went back. I think out of habit, I just went back to reading them as they were written. And I think there are pros and cons to both ways. Even when I was speaking from notes, I would usually write out the whole thing and then kind of transfer it just sort of an outline. I find that writing it out is very helpful because you might think that you know what you're going to say, but then you find yourself kind of like circling and you haven't really landed, and like I used that word, but is there a synonym? And um, so I find that writing it out really helps keep it tight. So I've always written some sort of draft for the most part. But um, but I guess I found in recent years that I've also been able to find a way to have the whole thing written out in front of me and still be able to make a good amount of eye contact and to also bring in sort of the passion and emotion. I think one thing that's made me feel vindicated at certain points is when if there are circumstances where I don't write it out and somebody asks for a copy of it. I don't really have a copy of it, so I think hopefully that tells me that people can't really tell the difference between when I have fully written drasha when it's just a few notes. There was actually an interesting experiment a couple weeks ago where I didn't have time to really write the drasha at all before Shabbos. Again, I had sort of the vort in mind, but I didn't write anything before Shabbos. So when I got up Shabbos morning, I literally had nothing in front of me, um, and it worked. But I still felt like that even like with having most of it in mind, it's just like it wasn't as polished and as tight because you're looking for the word and like where exactly do I want to end. Um so I personally feel like having some sort of whether it's notes or even the thing fully written out, I feel like I also like I like writing, so I feel like when I prepare a drasha and like I really like think about how I formulate things, I come to like those formulations, and I don't want to lose that because I feel like there's a certain eloquence that comes when I've really thought about how I'm phrasing things. So that's something that also, so it's something I struggled with, and some people might, I definitely know people who say that it's much better to speak without notes or with minimal notes, but I feel like everybody has to do what works best from them and what's going to make you shine the most. And some people can really just get up and and say it all out without having anything in front of them. And I feel like I'm a little bit more eloquent when I have something in front of me.
Yeah. How do you measure the effectiveness of your drasha for you? What's considered success?
It's a good question. Comments that are made afterwards definitely, I mean, obviously you don't get everybody coming over to you every single drasha telling you that that was a home run, because at a certain point, not every drasha ends up being a home run. And um, but at a certain point, once people are used to you, so even if you give a good drasha, so they're hopefully used to you giving good drasha, they don't have to like pat you on the back for that. But sometimes if somebody makes a comment that there was something particular that spoke to them, so I know that it worked. Or um, my wife is also a good barometer of that was really good or like that wasn't your best. So
Yeah, we all need one of those. Do you find that people are able to retain? Do people you ever get people coming back to you and bring up things that you've said in the past? Or
and I think if I'm like realistic with myself, like how much do I remember that? Um, how much do I remember what there are certain. I think there are probably some certain speeches um that I do remember somewhat, but I also I guess the way I look at speeches and even things that I read, like I don't remember everything that I read. Also, I feel like Torah is building blocks, and you know, you might not necessarily remember exactly what was said, or you might not remember everything, but things build up over time and they shape you. And even if you don't exactly remember what it is, it can still have made an impression and still influenced you some way or another. And it could be that later on that you know that you remember something because you heard it in the past. So even for myself, when I get sort of frustrated that I don't remember, I just like, I heard a great drasha and I don't even remember what the person said, or I read a great article, but I don't remember what was in it. So I think sometimes the goal is not necessarily to remember everything word for word, but um, to sort of shape who we are.
Right, right. Um, how do you deal with, I mean, everybody has, sometimes people would nod off in the middle of, a drasha, or, listening passively tends to, people tune out. Do you have a way of dealing with that, or is that, do you experience that? Let me ask you, what's some of the worst feedback you've ever gotten?
Some of the worst feedback that I ever
Yeah,
got.
from a drasha.
There can always be the um, I didn't like what you said, kind of, that I've gotten that feedback, not often, but on occasion, somebody took issue with something that I said. Um, Something that I had to work on for a long time was that, so in my shul, it's a huge sanctuary. It seats like 500 people. Shul's not that big anymore in terms of the audience, but people are kind of spread out throughout all of the quadrants. So to be able to project and enunciate in a fashion that everybody could hear. It was often a speed factor that people would say that, and I do talk pretty fast, so I had to get used to speaking a little bit slower. And even now, I probably I'm more conscious of it, but I could always use a little bit of work on slowing down. So that was kind of like the main criticism was usually not about uh, the content, but it was more just like that people wanted to hear what was being said, but it was
Or
too
the
fast or
delivery,
not loud enough for it. What?
the delivery, you're saying.
Yeah.
Got it. And so some of the best feedback. What are some of those positive things that have emerged out of your drasha?
And one thing that I was appreciative, particularly Balabas, who always tries to say something about the drasha that has some sort of like pun based on what I talked about. So I always kind of look forward to that, and it comes from a place of friendship and appreciation. Um, so I opened a drasha a couple weeks ago with a Harry Potter related anecdote. So he said so this one I remember he said that drasha was fantastic, and at first because of fantasy. Um, so um, I don't even remember all of them, but some of them are extremely clever. Um, so that's just something in general, but um, I think when people feel like that I spoke to what was important to them, what's on their mind, is something that's very touching. I think some of my I struggle sometimes before writing Yizkor Drasha because I'm like, what can I, there's Yizkor four times a year. I'm like, what's kind of a new thing that I can say that's related to Yizkor? But I think some of those drashas have actually been some of my best ones, um, and also with my Shabbat Shuvah drashas the last couple of years, I've gotten that was my Shabbat Shuvah drasha, and then the year after that was the best Shabbat Shuvah drasha. Um, occasionally people do really, when you really give your best, people really do come forward and say that. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What areas would you say you still struggle with? What are your challenges with the drasha? If you could improve in a couple areas, someone can wave a magic wand over your head and say, "Yeah, I could." You know.
I wish that I could I wish on some level that I could speak without notes in front of me. I think that would be, I think that, combination of that and and I think it's more the delivery. I think my content I'm usually extremely proud of, and delivery sometimes is better sometimes. So um, my wife says that I've grown tremendously over the years, and I think I have also. Um, but when I look at some of the dynamite speakers, it's always I'm always thinking about trying to match their level, which is something to aspire to.
Yeah, something to aim for. Tell me about the length of your drushes.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, one thing I've been very blessed with is that um, I've never uh, I've never had anybody complain that I spoke too long. I would say they're probably between 10 and 15, but yeah, I think some people have some very sort of dogmatic. And same thing with like with having notes in front of you. Some people have some very dogmatic like ideas of like this is the best way to speak and this is the best length to speak and whatnot. Um, and I feel like the general rule should be you have to keep your audience engaged um and there's this sort of a social contract also, right? So if the audience is expecting you to speak for 15 minutes, you speak for 25, so that's a big problem. Um, but but I think if the content is engaging them, I said when the first drush I gave after the war broke out, I said pretty upfront that this was going to be a little bit of a longer drusha. So I put that out there, but I also felt like that there was a lot on my mind. There was a lot to talk about, and at the same time, I think people were still processing a lot also. So I felt like that was a little bit warranted, but I think that's also sort of an advantage of writing drushes before, whether or not you again speak directly from paper or not. But when you've really given the time to lay it out, so you then know going into it how long it's going to be, and you can try to think about like what's extraneous here, what can I take out, and then and it's staying out. Um, so that's how I manage that also is that before giving the drasha, I see what's laid out and I try to think about like, what's really necessary here, what's helpful, and like what are the things that I can take out.
Mm-hmm. Do you ever prepare a drasha and when you get up to the pulpit, let's say, or even before, let's say, just in the beginning of davening, it just doesn't feel like it's the right drasha for the morning, and you kind of have to pivot or adjust or jettison. Does that ever happen?
I can't remember a particular time except at the morning of Shmini Atzeres. I heard on my way to shul what was going on in Israel, and I gave a lot of thought on my way to shul and the beginning of shul about what I wanted to do with the drasha at that point. I figured out a way to bridge because again, being that Shmini Atzeres, there was a little bit of a Yizkor component. It is a Yontif drasha, and but it was also Kohelet. So it happened to be like a little bit of a more somber drasha to begin with. So I figured out a way to sort of transition from that to talking about what had just broken out. I actually said at some point, this is the end of my prepared remarks, I went in to talk about the Israel stuff. So some people said that they actually found that to be like very effective. That that I had prepared something, but that I was ready to bring that into what was going on and to address the situation of the moment. So that was something I really had to think about.
With the advent of AI and ChatGPT and all these things, how do you see that factoring into drushes? Do you use it at all? Do you think it should be used?
But for better or worse, I don't really use it that much, if at all. I am starting to think about how AI could really be a tool not to produce the content for you, but to edit it or to give you other ideas or the like. I actually gave a drasha about this. Um, that but the whole concept by Daber Hashem and Moshe Lemor. What's the Lemor? And the Ramban talks about. I don't remember what the exact formulation was, but the Ramban talks about how that it's that something unique that Kadosh Baruch Hu was saying in that moment, and I used that to sort of talk about how that AI can come up with things for us, but we are unique people in the way how what we communicate and how we communicate it is a unique expression of who we are. So, I mean, I could say also that there are a lot of resources available for rabbis to get drasha material, and I use that sometimes to spark an idea, but I'm very uncomfortable with completely lifting something that somebody else has used because I feel like it needs to be an authentic expression of me. If I'm getting up and speaking, I want it to be that this is like something that this is something that you're not just getting from online or somebody else's, but I'm giving you a piece of me when I'm speaking. So that's something that's important to me. To me, is that there has to be sort of an authenticity and genuineness to what I'm saying. So AI could be a useful tool that maybe I'll take a little bit more advantage of, but um, I would I don't think I'll ever ask AI to write a drasha for me and just deliver that because I feel like that's not that's giving over content, but it's not giving it's not giving over sort of the neshama that I think is important in drasha.
Right. Do you speak elsewhere besides your shul? Do you find yourself you get different speaking engagements from time to time?
Every now and then, not frequently, but
So,
sort of twice a year I speak elsewhere.
so in those times, how do you? Every time you get up in front of a new audience, that you have the luxury of having people who know you, trust you, like you. You built up
Yeah.
that relationship over 4.5 years or so. When you get up to speak elsewhere, how do you establish that trust and connection and relationship to get people to be interested and wanting to listen to what you have to say? Do you have any? Is there anything that you specifically do, or do you try to uh, uh, make a little bit, warm them up a little bit, or is there anything
Yeah,
specific?
it's a good question. I always, say something about being thankful to have been invited and, and the privilege of speaking in that particular venue. So I never jump right into the content, but try to sort of show some appreciation for people that are there and people who invited me. But sort of beyond that, I guess one thing that I think about just choosing what I speak about is that there's certain things that I'd be comfortable experimenting with in shul that I would obviously you know try to keep things as neutral as possible in a certain way, and every now and then in shul I can maybe say something that's a little bit more controversial or something that's a little bit more of like how I really feel about something versus um, I try to be conscious of who the audience is, and not to say I don't think speakers should only tell people what they want to hear, but just sort of keep in mind that you don't really know who's in the audience, so like what kind of sensitivities can come up.
Uh, I just want to ask you a couple more technical questions. Things like where do you where you go to Svarim or resources to come up with content?
Yeah, I have a wonderful library of stuff. Um, Mikros Gedolos is obviously the starting is one starting point, um, and a lot of the stuff they can find in Al HaTorah, classical Mefarshim, but Rav Soloveitchik, Rabbi Lam, Uznaim LaTorah, is a favorite of mine, Rav Zalman Sorotzkin. Um, And I have like I have a couple starting from Steinsaltz. I have behind me also got a new set of Rabbi Barrel Wines drushas, Rabbi Nevensal's. So I'm always on the lookout for good svarim on the parsha that I can draw from. So Rabbi Baruch Simon, also Imre Baruch from YU, also can be a good starting point. Even also some Hasidic stuff in Sivil Shalom.
Mhm.
Um, yeah.
What about in terms of stories or anecdotes or things like that? Where do you statistics or interesting things like that? Where do you draw from?
So I do have some storybooks, but it's like hard to kind of like look for a story. Google's a little bit more helpful there. Um, I mean biographies are interesting. So, but um, I think earlier on I was more likely to sort of like Google to look for something, which I might still do sometimes, but I definitely feel like that either like things that I personally experienced or things that I know somebody who experienced something, or if I'm using like a pop culture reference, um, that's something that's like something that particularly speaks to me. I think is a better way to go because I think that's just it's a more authentic way of it's a more authentic way of going when you talk about something that actually like is part of your life and that interests you. So I think it's as opposed to just like I found this like random thing on the internet. Okay, so statistics, I have to do a little bit of research, but um,
Like
and
Harry Potter?
yeah, it's like like Harry Potter. Like I like actually when I introduced the dress show with Harry Potter, I talked about how like it was a big part of my childhood. Um, and same thing could go for the occasional movie or TV show. I'm not really a big movie or TV show buff, but if there's something that's related, I feel like something that that I drew from myself. Um, I feel like it's much easier to weave in. There was one time that I felt like particular dresser needed to open with a joke, so I went through Rabbi Joseph Telushkin's Jewish humor book, kind of perused it a little bit, and I actually found a joke that I really thought. But even like when I use a joke, um, the goal is not to. I'm not a comedian. I don't think I'm. Yeah. I have throwaway. I might have a throwaway line that's funny, sort of in the moment, but I wouldn't say I'm a big joke teller. But if there's something that I think really, so I don't do it just for the purpose of like warming up an audience. But if it's something that really actually gets to the core of the message of the drasha, I found that could be an effective way to open.
Sure. Do you collaborate at all with do you have peers that you collaborate with, or you kind of operate the drasha in a vacuum?
Occasionally, I'm in some WhatsApp groups where people, discuss what they're talking about. So, um, so there have been some times where I've asked somebody what they're talking about, or their WhatsApp group situation that get ideas, and things can kind of come collaboratively. But um, I'm often really thinking on my own what I want to do.
Yeah. Um, awesome. And the last question I have for you would be if you could go back in time and give yourself some advice as a young rabbi starting out, knowing what you know now in terms of speaking and what works and what doesn't work, what would you have told yourself?
I think one thing I've really learned over time is that I don't know if I can give a number to this, but let's say 60 or even 75% of the job is confidence and preparation. And the more confident you are, the more prepared you are, the easier it is to be passionate about what you're talking about. And you're not sort of worrying about, um, you're not trying to remember what you want to say. You're not worrying about what you want to say. But if you come forth with that confidence, preparation, so then the passion comes forth, and it's much easier to deliver a much more effective drasha shear or whatnot. So I think about that when I'm preparing also that I really try to make sure that everything is as prepared as possible, and that I'm prepared to be passionate about what I'm speaking about.
Okay, that's awesome.
You've been listening to The Maggid Method, and I'm Daniel Steinberg. There's a secret that great public speakers know. Did you know there's a method for cutting straight through to an audience's heart, grabbing their attention and holding it, and making a memorable impact with your presentation? The best speakers in the world utilize it, and now you can too, every time you get up to speak. Download your free Maggid Method of Public Speaking template at maggidmethod.com, maggidmethod.com. The Maggid Method will teach you how to find your authentic voice, craft meaningful presentations, manage people's attention, and build unbreakable bonds with your audience. Go to maggidmethod.com and download your free copy now. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.